Welcome, everybody. I'm going to wait a couple of moments as we allow more folks to join the webinar. I will start by letting everybody know. First of all, my name is Neil Popish, and welcome. You're not going to be able to see yourselves or hear yourselves. So the only people you will be seeing during the webinar will be Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival Director Joshua Abbey and Flannel Pajamas director and writer Jeff Lipsky. So I will give you some more instructions in a few moments. I see lots of people are joining, so that's wonderful. So if you could just give us a minute, and then I'll do some introductions. So welcome, and hope everybody's feeling well and being safe. And
Neil, tell us who you are.
Well, my name is Neil Popish, and I am the program director of the Jewish Community Center, which is a part of the, someone's saying hello to me, hello, which is a division of Jewish Nevada, which is Nevada's Jewish Federation. I've been with the JCC system for about 26 years. I started in Boca Raton, Florida. I worked in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I've been with the JCC in Las Vegas since 2004, but I did take a 4-year hiatus, and I've been back about a year and a half now. And I'm thrilled to be back. And I see we have some people chatting with me. I have Queen LV, hello, I don't know who that is.
Neil, thank you so much for initiating this series.
My pleasure.
That, people will find it valuable and continue to participate. And thank you, Jeff Lipsky, for being our first VIP guest of honor as a writer, filmmaker, and sharing your wonderful creation with us. We'll learn a lot more about it as we start our discussion.
Yeah, and likewise, I want to thank you, Josh, and you, Neil, for putting this thing together and offering me this opportunity. And for the people who are already watching, I want to thank everybody for both taking your time to watch the movie and then joining us for this discussion. And I hope everybody's safe. I hope your families are safe and enjoying themselves watching good movies and TV and streaming and music and that kind of thing.
Awesome, thank you. And we're not going to be waiting. People will be able to join in while we're having the conversation. But again, I wanted to welcome everybody to the very first Las Vegas Virtual Jewish Film Festival. I do want to let you know we have a second film that we will be releasing after this film. It's a documentary called Barbra Streisand. All right, calm down, everybody. Barbra Streisand Becoming an Icon, 1942 to 1984. And we will be doing another webinar 2 weeks from tonight, which is May 6th at 5 p.m. If you would like the link emailed to you, all you need to do in the chat, just send me your email address, and I'll make sure after this webinar you get that email. We also will be having a Q&A. So if any of our participants have a question, on the bottom of your Zoom screen, you see Q&A. Please click that and type in your question. And when Joshua Abbey has completed his questions with Jeff Lipsky, then I will ask those questions to Jeff and Joshua, and we'll get some answers, okay? So if you have any questions, you could always send me a message in the chat room. I did want to just start off with a little introduction and a bio about our two folks, our two panelists. First, I'd like to say welcome to Jeff Lipsky. Jeff Lipsky's career as a legendary independent film distributor was mentored by John Cassavetes, whom he distributed A Woman Under the Influence, The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, and Opening Night. Jeff co-founded October Films, Lot 47 Films, and Adopt Films. During his story distribution career, he released such iconic films as Hester Street, My Dinner with Andre, My Life as a Dog, Stranger Than Paradise, Sid and Nancy, L.I.E., Barbara, Sister, and Mike Lee's High Hopes and Life is Sweet. He made his directorial debut with Childhood's End, which was the official selection of the San Sebastian Film Festival in 1997, followed by Flannel Pajamas in 2006, which was the official selection dramatic competition Sundance Film Festival. One More with Feeling, the official selection of the Sundance Film Festival in 2009. 1230, the official competition selection of the Montreal World Film Festival in 2011. Molly's Theory of Relativity, opening night selection of the USA Film Festival in 2013. Mad Woman in 2015, and The Last in 2019. Jeff is also gearing up for his next film, Goldilocks and the Two Bears, which will begin production in 2021 in Las Vegas. Joshua Abbey, Las Vegas Film Festival director and webinar facilitator. He runs the longest film festival in Nevada. He created the Las Vegas Literary Film Festival when he was the program director at the Summerlin Library, as he was a founder and director of CineVegas International Film Festival. He has served as chairman of the City of Las Vegas Arts Commission, as a gubernatorial appointee to the Nevada Arts Council. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree in theater from University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and a Master of Fine Arts degree in producing from the American Film Institute in Hollywood, California. He has an extensive background in the arts and has produced numerous visual arts, dance, music, literary, theater, and film projects in Las Vegas, New York, Los Angeles, and Switzerland. Joshua has worked as program director for the Las Vegas Jewish Federation and as the executive director of Jewish Family Service Agency. I am going to now hand it over to Joshua and enjoy.
Welcome everyone, and let's get started. We're assuming that you have seen Jeff's feature. And I'd like to start by asking you, Jeff, just share with us a little bit about your personal upbringing and your background in the film industry, just briefly, if you could.
Well, personal upbringing, there's not a lot to tell, apart from the fact that like so many filmmakers, it wasn't school for me. It was movie theaters for me. I began virtually living in them from the age of 8 years old. And when I was 17, I saw a film that changed the way I looked at movies. It changed my life, which was John Cassavetes' film Husbands with Peter Falk and Ben Gazzara. And he became my guru at that point, even though the idea that I would ever have an opportunity to meet him then was so far removed from reality, I couldn't have imagined. The following year, I did get to meet him. I interviewed him for my college newspaper, and for whatever reason, he befriended me. And once he was your friend, you had to kill his firstborn before he would forsake you. And he gave me the opportunity to distribute his movie, his masterwork, A Woman Under the Influence, which starred Jenna Rollins, one of the greatest actresses of the 20th century. And that launched my career. I was hoping it would launch my career as a filmmaker. I didn't realize it would take another 27 years to make a film. But I learned everything that I know about filmmaking from John, and I can't imagine a better teacher. The European influence for me was Ingmar Bergman, and so instead of going on with a collegiate life and master's degrees and things like that, I became a film distributor and began those companies that Neil mentioned, and got to make my first movie in 1995, and here we are.
How long from the inception of the idea to create Flannel Pajamas until the actual start of the production?
Well,
it was a seed of an idea.
The idea and the writing of the first draft of the film probably got going at the end of 2003 into 2004. It was as soon as I finished the first draft, I was introduced to Jonathan Gray, who has just joined us, by the way. Jonathan Gray produced Flannel Pajamas. I wrote and directed it. I actually invested in it. And with all that said, there's no way I could have made this film without Jonathan. Jonathan is a prolific producer and entertainment attorney, and he was my conscience during pre-production, production, and post-production of the film. And if anybody is fortunate enough to ever work with him, they will know exactly what I'm talking about. I hope we get a chance to hear from him later.
Hi, Jonathan. Welcome. We do invite your comments as well. And Neil, I believe it's opened you up to participate. So Jeff, Cassavetes, that's a pivotal figure in the history of filmmaking. What did you learn most from observing his process, since you were fortunate to be intimately engaged?
Well, I learned how to direct actors, and I learned how to write dialogue. His character, people think he improvised his movies. He only improvised his first movie, Shadows. They were very tightly scripted after that, but he still gave his actors room at the tail end of each scene to improvise if they felt like they had something to say. But his work with actors, I got to see it firsthand, not just on set, but I would be invited to join on a Sunday afternoon a dozen or so of the greatest actors working at a script reading of something that would never be produced. And John would direct each of the actors, and I'd be given a role to play, and Lord knows I'm not an actor. But just to watch that happen firsthand, that was all about directing actors. In terms of, I think I asked him one day the most banal question I can imagine, which was how he wrote such naturalistic dialogue. And he had an answer for me. He had a cogent answer for me. He had an inspirational answer for me. And he said, it doesn't matter who your characters are or what the movie is. Try to just look at it as building blocks. Have somebody say something innocuous to the other person. And invariably, you'll come up with an answer. And all of a sudden, the personalities will emerge. He wrote his films very organically. And his films always had something autobiographically to do with the people in his life. So that's what I learned from him.
So knowing you as I do, I think you also shared what was his extraordinary devotion to the craft and the process. Talk a little bit about his obsession and his dedication and his commitment to making film.
Well, I mean, where our careers or our lives diverge is that when John decided he was going to make his own films by his own rules and invest his own money to create something he felt was lacking on the landscape of American independent cinema, he was one of the highest paid actors, movie stars, most successful movie stars in Hollywood. So, I started out as an usher at a movie theater. He was an Academy Award nominee for Best Supporting Actor for The Dirty Dozen. And in fact, when he finally gave up his full-time Hollywood career, he had been the star of the highest grossing film of 1968, which was Rosemary's Baby. So, I didn't have that experience. And I also think that one of the reasons he wanted to do his own stuff was, you look at something like Rosemary's Baby, directed by one of the great directors in the history of cinema, both American and European. John never really got along with too many of the directors who directed it. So, he was able to pull it off in spades. He was an Oscar nominee as an actor. But anyway, but that's where our careers differ. It was, I think that's what attracted him to me, me to him, is that he saw in me a diamond in the rough, somebody willing to break the rules, somebody willing to, to go all in on a story, on characters that, I was willing to give life to. And I didn't consider, how's this going to be marketed before I wrote the film, before I made the film, before I directed the actors. We'll worry about the marketing of the film later. And the irony, of course, is that I also learned marketing and distribution at his feet as well. But that was, happenstance more than, a plan.
Let's jump right into specific discussion about Flannel Pajamas. So thematically, I have a question here that says, beyond money, children, religion, pets, and in-laws, what do you see as the biggest challenges to successful relationships?
Flannel is my most autobiographical film. I'd say 50% of the film and 50% of the characters and incidents are rooted in reality. The rest is pure fiction to embroider this story. And I think that what I learned in my own life is something that I hoped would be conveyed by the characters of Stuart and Nicole, played by Julianne Nicholson and Justin Kirk in the film, which is that, marriage is supposed to be the pinnacle of something. It's supposed to be the all-embracing, it's supposed to be the ultimate love. Well, we say I love you from the time we're born. We say I love you to all kinds of people. We say I love you to sports figures. We say I love, but what's missing from marriages that don't endure is complete and utter and total pure empathy. And I think that that's, the story I wanted to tell of Nicole and Stuart was the trajectory of a couple's relationship from the time they meet on a blind date through courtship, the marriage, and the dissolution of the marriage. And I think that what you see is how difficult it is to have complete empathy for another person. But most marriages don't end because of infidelity and because of abuse, be it verbal or physical. They end for any number of reasons. And that's the story I wanted to tell, the quotidian reasons. That
Which of the two central characters you felt lacked the most empathy, or was it a shared deficiency?
I'd like to think it was shared. One of the great challenges in the editing of the film, and I had a fantastic editor, her name is Sarah Corrigan. The film was 171 scenes. In the editing room, we cut 51 scenes out. 12 or 13 of them were bad, and I take full responsibility for those. But the rest of them were really good. But the challenge in the editing room was to make sure we kept the audience's sympathies for both characters even. We didn't want to demonize one over the other. We didn't want to vilify one over the other. We wanted to allow audiences to make up their minds, or to almost be frustrated by the fact that it's nobody's fault. And so I'd like to think it was kind of even between the two of them. I had one lovely day in the editing room was when we showed a rough cut to a mother and her daughter. And at the end of the movie, they both got into this horrible fight with each other about which of the two characters was more to blame for the end of the marriage. And I was just sitting back listening to this wonderful battle.
So for me, one of the strong implications of the film is that your childhood experience plays a rather significant role in your capacity to maintain relationships as an adult, in friendships, professionally, and especially in marriage. You want to elaborate a little bit on that? Or was that a consideration as you gave all the background about their family history as relevant to their character? I
don't know that that was a conscious decision on my part. Certainly, I came from a much smaller family than my ex-wife in real life did. So that's the kind of construct that I wanted for Stuart's family and Nicole's family. I wanted Nicole to have a much more easy-going time of finding friends, and I wanted Stuart's friendship quotient to be rather low. In fact, there's that scene where kind of it's the scene where Nicole challenges him to make friends, make new friends. We live in a building with 400 people. Let's go make friends. And she forces him to kind of go beyond his comfort zone. So from that standpoint, I apologize. I'm not sure if I addressed the specific thing you were asking about.
Well, I was just indicating that it seems your upbringing and your childhood and relationship with your family at home plays a rather large role in your capacity to manage relationships as an adult.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I think that's true. I think in real life, I go overboard initially in relationships trying to impress somebody. And maybe I succeed all too often too well in the early stages, but then I don't know how to navigate, you know, the relationship as it goes, as it becomes a real thing, a tangible thing that might endure, that might grow, that might blossom into something, into a new family, really. So I think that was Stuart's plight.
In Stuart's experience, his childhood trauma, if you would characterize it as that, due to his relationship, his difficult relationship with his mother and his father and his brother, prevented him from attempting marriage until he's what, 35?
35, yeah.
Years old, you know. And Nicole, of course, as a child of physical abuse, you know, was married, I think, prior to being 20, because the line is, you know, why did she, when he asked why did she break up, she said she turned 20, right? So there's a very interesting dynamic in terms of that personal history that, you know, is potentially a big fissure that doomed them from the start. Him not feeling really viable or capable of having a real relationship, and so overcompensating it to try to achieve it, and her, you know, looking for the recognition and the love that she never, you know, that was probably not realistic, you know, that was beyond at least his capacity to provide. Let's engage our audience a little bit. Let's get some questions, Neil, from our friends out there, who I'm sure also are very curious about specific aspects of Jeff's film.
I'll be honest, I am still waiting for the very first question.
Okay, well, I'll keep going, but I encourage
questions
everybody
yet?
to jump in. I'm sure you have some curiosity points.
Does anyone have questions? Do you have any questions for Jonathan Gray?
Well, Jonathan, let's get your take on this project, and, you know, from when you first heard about it to why you embraced it and how challenging it was to achieve it, and your role as producer, if you want to share.
Sure.
anything
Am I on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you know? Hello, Jeff. It's been too long.
Jonathan, happy pre-birthday.
Thank you, Jeff. I don't know where to begin exactly. Jeff Lipsky was an icon from the time that I entered the business, and I'm in the business now for 25 plus years. At the point that I produced Flannel Pajamas, I had produced a handful of shorts, a few of them I had at Sundance, and you know, was at a transitional point in my life and my career, wanting to focus more on producing films. And, you know, Jeff and I had already collaborated together. Well, we worked together on the legal front a little bit, and had a relationship with one of his brothers as well. And from the time I read Flannel Pajamas, you know, I immersed myself in it. There was sort of a reality to the manner in which the characters were developed and presented that struck my, you know, struck a chord with my heart, quite frankly. Jeff is inimitable. There is no other Jeff Lipsky in my experience. He is as passionate and as committed as anyone I've ever known. We embarked on making a film that, as Jeff said, was, you know, we cut out ultimately 51 scenes, which, you know, killing babies is, as they say in the business, is a very difficult thing to do. But it was really, this is somewhat self-serving, but, you know, quite a Herculean effort making, you know, a film that we sort of shot two films. We shot a film that I think the first cut was, you know, about 2 hours and 40, you know, some odd minutes.
Yep. It was actually 3 hours and.
There you go. So effectively, you know, for if I can disclose the budget for, you know, under $500,000, we shot two films on film, or the duration of the film was the equivalent of two feature-length films. The experience itself was, you know, from the first moment to the last, I'm not sure I slept more than a couple of hours, you know, a night. And Jeff's something of a magician. I would say, everybody on the crew who were all, working, 14 plus hours a day, shared the commitment that Jeff had. When you look at the leader, and Jeff was, the leader here, you sort of let their, work ethic sort of, dictate how you operate, and nobody has a stronger work ethic. It was a really incredible process, and one that, I genuinely grew from. There's plenty of stories, as any of these productions, have, but, at the end of the day, I'm incredibly proud with what we, brought to the, brought to the world. And for me, if the film managed to touch a couple of folks and provoke people to think about, their lives and relationships, to me, that's a success. I've talked in broad strokes. I'm happy to answer any specific questions, but, that experience for me was really fundamental in my career.
I just want to add to what Jonathan just said, is that I had experiences, firsthand experiences, after the film was released. I would meet people, complete strangers, not friends, nobody I knew. And somebody would come up to me and say, I went with my girlfriend to see the film, and after we saw the film, we decided to get married. And then I had another person weeks later come up to me and say, I went with my wife to see the film, and after we saw it, we decided to divorce. And so for me, this was a victory, a total victory.
If you remember, Jeff, excuse me for interrupting, one of my cousins had the same experience. He watched it with his girlfriend. It was the first time they ever said, "I love you" to each other. They were married, I think, about 4 or 5 months later. Jeff, I don't know if you know this, they are now divorced. But if nothing else, you inspired a marriage that, ultimately resulted in divorce.
Let me just say one other thing at this point, too. One of the reasons why, in our opinion, Flannel Pajamas triumphs the way it does and touches so many people the way it does is because of our extraordinary cast. Although there were 41 speaking roles in the film, obviously the anchors of this movie are Julianne Nicholson, who went on, to do a million little things, but of late, her big triumph was as Nancy Kerrigan? No, Tanya Harding's skating instructor in I, Tanya. And of course, Justin Merrick, after Angels in America and after Flannel Pajamas, went on to do 8 seasons of Weeds. And not just the two of them, but Jamie Harold, who plays Stuart's suicidal brother, and Rebecca Shull, who has now been in 4 of my films, who plays Julianne Nicholson's mom, who is suffering from early onset Alzheimer's, to character actors like Tom Bauer, and one of Richard Harris's sons played a small little role in the film. So we were blessed with the budget that Jonathan talked about. He just glossed over the fact that we actually shot it on film. And you asked Josh before how long it took to come up with the idea and then to write it. We actually worked on the film first, initially me alone, and then with Jonathan. We actually worked on the film for over 2 years, but it only took 28 days to shoot. We had a very long post-production period. Jonathan and 2 co-producers were instrumentally helpful in helping my editor and I shape the film. As he said, the first rough cut was 3 hours and 10 minutes, and we had to shave off 1 hour and 10 minutes of that movie.
Did you do any script readings?
No.
With the actors, and then alter the dialogue as a result of that? Do you ever work on that?
In fact, in the entire movie, which is obviously a very dialogue-driven movie, there is only one single improvised line in the film, and that's by Jamie Harold, who plays the brother, when they arrive at the Montana house for Christmas, and he says to Rebecca Shull, the mother-in-law, he says, "This is very spacious." And it was at the end of a take. I thought it was appropriate for the character and funny, so I kept it in. We did do 1 week of rehearsals with most of the principal actors. Jonathan and, Julianne and Justin worked with me every day that week. And then we would bring in one or another of the other characters in the film. But you know what? It was the last time. I've made 7 films now. It was the last time I had any rehearsal, because I find that if you've cast the film properly, and that the best actors, I'm not talking about method actors, the best actors on set want to be absolutely fresh. They want every take to be, just spontaneous. They are very good at taking my direction between takes, but they want to be surprised. They don't want to have it be stale. And, I found that 1 week of rehearsals was more about socialization than anything else. So I seldom shoot more than 2 or 3 takes of anything, because unless there's a technical problem. And those are the performances I got. I do want to mention, though, that I mentioned 41 speaking roles. Our casting director, who I was introduced to by Jonathan, was a young woman named Patricia DeSerto, who cast 2 of my films, and then she went on to not replace, to what's the word? To become Woody Allen's casting director after Taylor retired. So, I mean, she's just sparklingly talented, and we owe her a lot for that cast.
So, Jeff, let's ask.
We do have a couple of questions from the audience. Okay, you want me to ask one of them?
Get to them, please.
All right. Well, I have a question from Francesca. And she said, when I see movies with nudity, I always wonder how the director decides on the amount of nudity in any given scene. How do you explain how you decided on this?
Well, I suppose by Hollywood standards, there's a good measure of nudity in the film, but everything you see in the film was exactly the way it appears in the script. The actors knew up front what was going to happen, when it was going to happen. We were very, these days they use something called intimacy coaches or directors on set. I find that frankly, a ridiculous concept. I think if you're a good director, male or female, it's incumbent upon you to create, if it's 2 actors involved, a triangulation of trust from day one. The actors understand they're never going to be surprised at what they see on screen. And the other thing about the nudity in this film is that, believe it or not, there's only 1 nude scene that is a sex scene. The rest of it is all in the service of naturalistic moments in a very intimate relationship. And in fact, sometimes it's absolutely essential for the plot, which is, I'm talking about the lovely moment when Julianne Nicholson, when Nicole is seen already in bed, undressed, lying on her stomach, and her husband, it's still in the early stages of their relationship, is kissing her leg and moving up her leg. And when he gets to her butt, he knows there's a prominent scar. And he asks her what this is. And she lies, or it's a long mission, or she's on talking. And we don't find out where that scar is. It's an important thing, because we don't find out where that scar came from until that very incredibly powerful hospital cafeteria scene where her mother confronts Justin Kurt's character, Stuart. So in terms of determining the amount, it's determined in the script. And then we edit these scenes just the same way we would edit a scene without nudity. How is this scene most effective? How does it make its point? Because all of them have a point. Even the one sex scene climaxes, no pun intended, in a beautiful, intimate conversation, short conversation between the 2 young lovers. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Yeah, I have another question. This one is for Jeff and Jonathan from Amanda. And Amanda would like to know, can you speak about your experience working with actors Justin Kirk and Julianne Nicholson, including casting them?
Well, Jonathan, do you want to start? I mean, I can start.
Jeff, you start, and I'm happy to chime in after.
Well, I was very, very fortunate. I kind of wrote the role of Nicole for Julianne Nicholson. I had been familiar with her work. She starred in an independent film that was also at Sundance a couple of years earlier called Tully. Has nothing to do with the Charlize Theron Tully that was made 20 years later. And she was just fantastic in it. And she looked, frankly, she looked a little like my ex-wife in real life, but she was beautiful and yet not in a way that would be intimidating to somebody. And her talent, I was also familiar with her work for the last 2 seasons on Ally McBeal, knowing that she could be equally wonderful doing drama and comedy. So I was lucky enough when we hired Patricia, the casting director, to have her reach out to her agent, and then I met with her, and she loved the script and said yes. I didn't know who I wanted when I was writing the film for the role of Stuart. But after the script was written, and when I kind of knew the film was going to get made, I was very excited one night. I was home by myself watching the debut of part 1 of the HBO original movie version of Angels in America, which I had seen on Broadway and loved. And I love Al Pacino and Meryl Streep and Emma Thompson, so I couldn't wait to see. I love Mike Nichols. So I was watching it by myself at home, and 1 hour into it, I literally pointed at my screen and said out loud to myself, that's who I want to star in my movie. And that was Justin Kirk. And it was the same situation. I had to fly to Los Angeles to meet with Justin because he lived there at the time. And we immediately clicked. Almost, he met me at an apartment in Beverly Hills, and 2 minutes later, he said, where do I sign? And then we had a long conversation. But that's how I cast the 2 of them. Jonathan, do you want to say anything about them?
Sure. I want to take a step back for a second with respect to the, the nudity. This was, from my perspective, some of the least gratuitous, nudity that I've seen on film. It was, so, directly tied to the intimacy of the moment within the film that I really appreciated it. It showed the vulnerability of the characters. And I think with respect to the actors, the level of trust that they showed to Jeff in quite literally exposing themselves like that, not just physically, but emotionally, really speaks to their talents as well as, Jeff's stewardship as a director. I have a quick anecdote to share. Day 2 or day 3 of the production, and Jeff very specifically wanted to shoot some of the more intimate scenes first. And if you recall the scene in the apartment in the bathtub, I'm sure Jeff remembers all of this.
Oh, I know where this is going. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. We had this tiny little low budget film had rented a location through our locations manager, and it turned out that the
this is in Nicole's first apartment.
Right, and the tenant that we had rented the apartment from turned out to be a squatter who was a year and a half delinquent on his rent. We were effectively evicted from the apartment on the second day of the shoot. Julianne's husband, who's a lovely fellow named Jonathan Cake, had been around the set as well. So here we are with cops and the landlord and a bunch of people. We're getting thrown out of a location. We've got to, basically pack up all our gear on day 2 or day 3 of the production. And Justin and Julianne are both in bathrobes. They're shooting a closed set scene. And Justin comes up to me and says, Jonathan, it was great experience working with you. I really, this is pretty much it for me. And Julianne is just sitting there doe-eyed, nods along with him. And they turn and walk down the stairs. And I'm looking around saying, oh my God, is that really it? The bottom line was that they were planning a party, basically. And Jonathan Cake, Julianne's husband, had gotten a step ahead and gotten us a bunch of seats at a bar. And it turned out to be, in light of everything that happened, a wonderful experience because it brought us all much closer together. And Justin, I've made a couple of films with after Flannel Pajamas, and he's just a character. He is a good guy and a very funny guy and a wise guy. And his sense of humor really, and I think, Jeff, you'll agree, his sense of humor really helped us get through, not only the difficult days in the production side, but the more intimate scenes. He was always there with a quick wit.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you one very specific example. In one of the most powerful takes that Julianne did that actually brought my wonderful producer, Jonathan, to tears. It's the scene where in the apartment, in their high-rise building, when Julianne, her husband interrupts her. She's on the phone with her mother. And he rushes into the bedroom and says, I wanted to talk to you. And this is the time she unloads on him. And it's this horribly emotional conflict she's having because she knows there's trouble in her marriage. She's never gone, full out and kind of expressed her anger at her husband before. And at the same time, she's talking to her mother who's experiencing the early, the early time of dementia and Alzheimer's. And she's trying to hold it together. and I gave her this direction that to remind her about her mother halfway through, and she's tearing up. She's trying not to cry full on. And we did the first take, and it was almost letter perfect. I wanted one little change, and I whispered it to her because it was a very quiet, there was more of an intimate set than any of the nude scenes. And she did it a second time, just nailed it. And really only because I wanted to be further entertained, I said, well, let's just do one more as a safety. And she got halfway through it, and she physically fell apart. She emotionally fell apart. And she turned around, she was leaning on the bed. She turned around and started crying, horribly crying. And I went over I said, cut. I went over to her. I put my arm around her. I was whispering things. I was trying to, assure her how everything was great. But I couldn't get her to stop. Justin came over to the bed, whispered something in her ear, and she started cracking up laughing. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do what Justin can do. And she said, that's okay, nobody can.
Jeff, let's
I have one more question here.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
One more question from Lynn, and it's to Jeff. And it says, Jeff, can you talk about Jeff Lipsky, the writer, and Jeff Lipsky, the director, and how they work together?
Jeff Lipsky, the director, doesn't come on board until Jeff Lipsky, the writer, is finished with the writing. Because when Jeff Lipsky, the writer, is working, he doesn't know whether there's even going to be a movie made. And so it's a fool's errand to start, allowing Jeff Lipsky, the director, to impose anything. I do now, because I'm still making very micro-budgeted films digitally instead of what Flannel Pajamas was, which was film. I do write for a budget if I think I can come up with a script that is worthy of making into a movie. But as a writer, I basically come up with a concept. I outline the entire film from first scene to end, just so I know what's going to happen at the end of the movie before I really start writing it. And then I wind up writing, because my films are so allegiant to dialogue. I begin writing on scraps of paper, random lines of dialogue. Sometimes I don't even know which character is going to utter that dialogue. And once I've got a pile of a few hundred lines of dialogue, I literally put them into the appropriate scenes that I've already outlined. And then it all does tend to happen organically. I write it. The writing at that point becomes much easier. And it's not that I go through so many drafts after I've written the first draft. It's more like I eliminate a scene or add a scene. But I don't start, do wholesale drafts. I never think it's that necessary. The director really doesn't come on board until I know there's money to make the movie.
I want to talk a little bit, Jeff, about the role of the mother, because I think, her scenes in the latter part of the film are some of the most dynamic and really have tremendous impact, primarily because of the performance of Rebecca Shaw, who also was the main character in your last film, The Last, and there were some parallels between the characters. So how did you come to wanting to engage religion as part of the conflict?
Well, my marriage was a mixed marriage. I'm Jewish, and my ex-wife was Catholic. And by the way, let me say something right up front. In real life, my ex-wife's father was, to the best of my knowledge, did not physically abuse his children, nor did my ex-mother-in-law express, outwardly at least, any anti-Semitic utterance. But that said, I think there was always an underlying tension. I tried to embrace the traditions, not the religious aspects of it, but the traditions of Christmas with her family. And the whole problem was there wasn't really a reciprocal effort on her part, mainly because I was not really an observant Jew at that time. So there was no Seder that we would host. There were no big, I mean, we had a menorah when we had a Christmas tree up, but we didn't have Hanukkah parties. We didn't have children, so we didn't socialize with other Jewish families celebrating the holidays who had children. But there was an undercurrent of this stuff going on. When I decided, so I needed, the idea of her mother in the film, you know, exclaiming, you know, her anti-Semitic leanings, you know, that was fabricated. I decided that I wanted to make her a tragic character and a character that Stewart could almost hate and want to and physically assault, and yet she was to be pitied at the same time. I think her character is in a sense as complex as Stewart's character or Nicole's character. And I think that if you look at isolate the two scenes that the mother has, the dramatic, the apocalyptic scene in the hospital cafeteria near the end, and the earlier scene when her daughter calls her mother in Montana to ask for her sister's phone number, and the mother says, "Oh, sure, honey, I have it in the other room. Let me go get it." And in a very short 1 minute, 2 minute scene, we follow the mother towards the other room. By the time she gets in the other room, she's completely forgotten what she's doing in the other room, what she's supposed to do, and even that her daughter is on the phone. So I think when you contrast those scenes, that's where it came from in that film. And I think in my own life, there was some jittery underpinning of conflict between our religions. Our marriage was by a justice. We were married by a justice of the peace. We weren't married. We were married outdoors. It was not in a religious building, and you know, it's kind of like a secret we swept under the carpet. It wasn't a secret, but it was something that we just swept under the carpet. We said, we'll deal with this later. We never had a conversation about how our children would be brought up religiously had we had children. But my wife did miscarry, just like Nicole did in the movie. So it was incorporating fact and, for dramatic purposes, fiction in such a way that we believed what was going on in the movie was plausible.
I thought a very interesting scene was after Nicole is praying, and it's her sister, right, who confronts her.
Yes, the one sister that Stewart seems to take a liking to.
Right, and her confrontation is fundamentally, you know, that reality has to be handled face to face, and that deferring to God.
The sister's being critical of Nicole, and yet the sister even says, "I'm still Catholic," but she knows what's going on in this marriage. To her, it should be about the marriage. Nicole, why are you doing this?
And then when Stewart confronts Nicole about her mother's hypocrisy, you know, being a devout Catholic, of course, you know, it's parallel to that as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's, you know, his discovering the crosses in the drawer after she leaves. You know, those were just really nice touches about sort of, you know, the desperate search for resolution on both their parts, you know, spiritually and materially.
And he's still finding things out about her. I don't think he knew those crosses were there. He's imagining how many other crosses is she, you know, secreting around the apartment. Her best friend Tess, who he takes an animosity towards from day one, we always see Tess wearing a cross. In every scene, it's a different cross.
There's also kind of a reveal about potentially a significant part of her reluctance to taking birth control, right?
Yes, and we never do know for a fact whether she is on the pill when she miscarries. Mm-hmm. So that's also a major, you know, question left up in the air for Stewart, as we certainly don't hear him in their little confrontation after the procedure, after the D&C. He doesn't bring that up.
Yeah, I think there was just enormous complexity and sensitivity in the creation and portrayal of the secondary characters. I just walked away wanting to know more, you know, details about their personal conflicts and, you know, life challenges, and the quality of the acting of those ancillary characters was extraordinary. It was truly exceptional. Yeah.
In that regard, one of the things I'm most proud of is, it's clear. I mean, he says it at the diner, the date that never ends. He tells her, I'm very skeptical about this best friend of yours, Tess. And so I was writing the character of Tess as the writer, not really liking her. But just like Stewart in the film, I'm turned around when he sees her working as a pediatric nurse in the hospital, and she's being right up front, and she's not trying to be confrontational with him. He's flailing at that point in his relationship, and he's looking to her, the woman he has demonized from day one, for some kind of help.
I mean, I think
I was ready to tell you not to come to our apartment anymore. Oh my God.
I think ultimately, in evaluating who was more at fault, to me personally, it's very apparent, that Stewart lacked the wherewithal to make a difference. I mean, and you sort of shared that sentiment describing the scene where they come home from the hospital. You want to revisit that for a second?
Yeah, I think that, one popular debate that audiences can have, and I embrace the debate, is at what point is the marriage definitively over? It's reached a point of no return. And as the writer-director, I think that moment is when, after the procedure, after the miscarriage, Stewart drives Nicole home in a frenzy, and they get into their apartment, and Nicole, without hesitation, walks right into the bedroom, takes her winter coat off, and gets right into bed and pulls the cover over her. And Justin is standing at the door in his jacket, and he says to her, "Can I get you anything?" And she says no. And he says, "Are you sure?" And she doesn't answer. And he leaves. And I've always felt that if he had not left, if he had taken his own jacket off, and just gotten into bed and held her, because, and we didn't talk about this before, I think that, I'm not saying the marriage would have been saved. I'm just saying it might not have been finished. And there's a moment that actually, after he closes the door, Nicole starts tearing up, and under her breath says, almost pleadingly, "Stewart." And to me, that's it. And
I was going to add what you just did, that he not only left the room, he closed the door.
Yeah. So for me, that's the moment. But I've heard from audiences, I've heard from colleagues who have differing opinions about when they think the marriage is beyond the point of no return.
Yeah, and when we had talked previously, my feeling was about Stewart's character is that in some ways her leaving him justified his doubt in himself of truly being capable of sustaining a long-term relationship. It was almost, justification, of his own self-destructive, or,
his own frailty.
His own frailty, his lack of self-worth,
Yeah, you mentioned it to me earlier when we were talking, Josh. There's a scene, a penultimate scene before the end of the film, where we see him at the wedding, of course, but we really meet his father for the first time. His father comes to visit after Nicole has left the apartment. And I think that's an essential scene in a sense, because we get a certain candor and history that we don't know about Stewart before, and a candor because he's talking to a man he's known his whole life. And we find out a little bit about his father, but I think we find a lot about Stewart too, and his relationship with his dead brother now. So
that was the only, as I shared with you in our prior conversation, that was the only element that I really missed, was an opportunity to see the brothers interact before the brother committed suicide.
Yeah,
not necessarily, revealing that was his intention, but just because that relationship was, quite fundamental to Stewart's character.
Yeah, the last time we see them before he kills himself is in that frantic scene with his girlfriend when they're, using vile language and upsetting Nicole. And his last line, the last line we hear is, he says, as he's walking out of the apartment, his brother says, "You know what's wrong with the gene pool? There's no lifeguard." And a lot of people miss that because it's like with all this action that's going on at the same time.
I also love the scene early on where Tess is questioning Nicole about Stewart's viability as, you know, her partner. And she says exactly that, but I love
She says it
him, as if wishing it would be sufficient to achieve it.
That's right. And she says, I love you 7 times. I mean, the interesting thing, and I did this deliberately, is that at least during the film, we never hear them say, I love you to each other. And Stewart says it just before Nicole, in the bedroom scene, when he comes home from Los Angeles, and he decides, okay, baby, I'm all in. And he says, I love you. And she's, I'm leaving you. And that's the only time.
Okay, well, do we have any more input? It doesn't have to be a question. You can share an impression of the film, or...
Jonathan, do you want to conclude our end of the conversation with anything?
Jeff, I'm going to end it by saying I love you, I miss you, and if I should find myself in Vegas at some point, it astounds me that you're there.
I look forward to the day that I can come back to New York and celebrate your birthday with you in person.
And I just want to add that Jeff is a great asset to our community on many levels. He was extremely helpful in the production of the last Jewish Film Festival, and I hope to integrate and utilize his vast skill and experience moving forward. We've become good friends, and if anybody knows a very interesting woman that would like to meet Jeff, he would like to meet her as well.
Yeah, I don't know that this is the right time, but what I do want to do, though, is that I was hoping to do it this year. Obviously, it's not going to happen until next year, as we mentioned, as Neil mentioned up front. I do hope that my next film, my 8th film, is shot in Las Vegas in 2021. It is called Goldilocks and the Two Bears, and when you see the movie, it will become apparent why it is called that. It is not a fairy tale. You know, I'm really looking forward to it, to, you know, my adopted home, really doing justice to it cinematically. What's
the best way for people to reach you, Jeff?
Wow, I never know this. You want my email address? Give them my email address. I mean,
contact the film festival.
I'm not Barbara Streisand. This is the first time I've opened for Barbara Streisand. You know, if anyone wants to email me, it's fine. The email address is basically Jeff A. Lipsky at Gmail. So it's Jeff A. Lipsky at gmail.com. And I will reply.
Yes, that's one thing about Mr. Lipsky that is irrepressible, is his punctuality and his etiquette as a gentleman in responding to any and all inquiries.
Thank you. I do have a Facebook account, but I almost never look at it. So that would probably be the worst way to reach out to me.
And Facebook's probably the best way to reach out to me, because I'm completely hooked, especially now in the midst of the crisis. And I think it's important, you know, that we have these opportunities. So I just want to again thank Jewish Nevada, JCC, everybody involved in making this possible. And I hope that you'll spread the word to others so we can have even more participation in our next outing, which is a totally obscure, never before seen in America, BBC production of Barbra Streisand's early years with some really, really unique footage from her childhood up until she won the Oscars for Yentl, I believe, 1984. Yeah. So that's definitely worth checking out, and hopefully the big name cachet, Streisand, will generate a little more turnout than Lipsky, but that's going to change in the course of time, I'm sure.
I want to thank everybody on this call too, on this meeting, for watching the film, for participating today. And you can still see the film. I hope you do. And all of my other films are on Vimeo to rent or buy. So
and Amazon also, right?
Flannel is on Amazon. The Vimeo is the platform for most of my films, including some amazing films with one's called 1230, which stars Jonathan Groff and Mamie Gummer, Meryl Streep's daughter, and Karen Young. And
Jeff, walk people through that. They go to Vimeo.com and type in your name.
I posted the link with the password in the chat for everybody who may have missed it.
For this film, but I'm saying it for all his other
Yeah,
films.
the other,
Vimeo.
I'm not sure, I'm embarrassed, but yeah, if you search my name and the title of the film, and obviously you can just go on IMDb on my name and you can get all the film titles and the casts and everything else.
Okay, Neil, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I just wanted to again thank Joshua Abbey and Jeff Lipsky, as well as Jonathan, for chiming in. This is our very first attempt at our virtual film festival, and I couldn't have asked for anything better. Thank you. So great questions.
I do want to add a nod to Richard Frankoff, who was instrumental in the planning of all this. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you as always. And I had put up there, we will, if you want to get a link to the Barbra Streisand film, you can send me your email address, but it'll be listed in the Facebook page of JCC and Jewish Nevada, and it will be in an email blast over the next 2 weeks, so you can get all the information there. And if you need to reach out to Neil, just my email is neil, Neil, @jewishnevada.org. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Joshua. Thank you again, Jeff.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Stay safe, everyone.